Hey, everybody. It's Bunny Pounds, president of Christians Engage, on a very important episode where we're going to be talking about voting. We spent the whole month of January talking about pray and prayer, and now it is time to talk about the vote. We are a Texas-based ministry that's launching nationally, as you know, and so, we're still very focused in Texas, and we're about to be one of the first states in the union with a primary. So I have the distinct privilege of having our vice president here with me, Scott Jones.
Well, thank you, Bunny. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Woohoo! In studio. So Scott was the co-writer of our book, Vote, Your Biblical Guide to This Sacred Responsibility. And Scott is one of our main writers on our blog. Scott, we just started, taking subjects, like, what do we have to cover to educate people on the importance of their vote? And that's kind of how this book came, and you have just been an awesome writer on communicating this to people.
Well, thank you, Bunny. I appreciate that.
So what got you focused? You're a former Navy man, internal auditor. Oh, I guess you're always a Navy man, right?
Coast Guard.
Oh, sorry.
Coast Guard.
Coast Guard. Okay. Coast Guard. Sorry, Coast Guard folks. You're the last people on the totem pole, right? No, not really. But Coast Guard, you grew up in a very patriotic family, you have patriotic roots, of course, love being an American. But what, as a Christian and someone that loves God, you started focusing in on this idea of voting and engaging really in your life and ministry. Why was that important to you?
Well, I think it goes back. My dad saw a lot of the problems that we have today coming as early as the 1950s and 60s. In 1962, he ran for the United States Senate, which was a great example for me for getting involved. I went to the Coast Guard Academy. I had a career in the Coast Guard, so that was pretty much my engagement for a long time. But 2008, we looked at what was happening, and Patty and I just kind of woke up and said, we've got to get involved. We've got to do something. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we saw right away that's important is casting a vote. God has given us a piece of the sovereignty that he gives to kings and other rulers in this country, and we need to exercise that to choose able, wise, discerning, honest leaders to represent us.
It's so good. I remember last year, my husband and I like to take these little trips for our anniversary, and so we pick a different city. This year, we're going to Destin, Florida. Yay! Well, last year, we went to the cold. We went to Philadelphia, and I'm there at Independence Hall, and I'm kind of reliving that whole story, which you know well. Eric Metaxas wrote about it in his book, If You Can Keep It, of the lady that comes out of Independence Hall, sees, or walking by, and sees Benjamin Franklin's and says, what kind of government have you given us? And he says, I've given you a republic if you can keep it. What has the founders given us? What has separated us as Americans, as a democratic republic, from all the other nations of the earth?
Well, first of all, we are, I'll use the word constitutional republic. We are founded on a constitution which embodies a lot of biblical principles. If you go and study the founding, you'll find that many of the founders were actually pastors or were schooled in theology, and they brought those principles into our government. But one of the things that they gave us was the consent of the governed. They use voting or a democratic process to elect the representatives of the republic. And as I said, I think this is something unique in our nation, that God gave the citizens sovereignty that he normally reserved for kings and other rulers.
And we see that representative government is a biblical idea, right? They just didn't come out of thin air. Yeah. Remember the story of Moses? We teach about that in our on-ramp class. Moses and his father-in-law Jethro was like looking at Moses' life and going, dude, you've got way too much going on. You cannot govern all these people. So set up rulers over 50, over 100, etc., and get these people as leaders, leading other people.
If my memory serves correctly, that's Exodus 18.
Oh, yeah.
That's also where we get guidance about how to select our rulers. We're select out of all the people, able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain.
Yes. And you've emphasized that as points that we need to think about as we're electing people, right? Repeat those again,
yes.
Scott.
able men who fear God, men of truth, and those who hate dishonest gain. And then in Deuteronomy 1:13, it says, choose wise, discerning, and experienced men from your tribes. So
Mm.
these are the guidance. These are the characteristics that when we use our right as voters, these are the things we should look for in the people that we're electing. We're not going to find any perfect men. Jesus is not going to be on the ballot.
Right.
So we're always selecting between men that have been damaged by sin. But still, when we take these characteristics, some of them are better than others, and we should be able to discern who those people are and exercise our sovereignty to select them.
So good. So, y'all know if you've been hanging around us for any length of time, everything at Christians Engage revolves around three things: pray, vote, and engage. This little card, if you can see it on video, is our Pray, Vote, and Engage pledge. You can take this on our website. You can text 484848. So you can literally put those numbers in your phone, 484848, and text the word engage, and then fill out that form and take our pledge to pray, vote, and engage. Now, why this is important is that we need to start praying for our elected officials, our city, state, nation. We need to vote in every election, and then we need to commit our heart to some sort of civic education or involvement. Scott, what does that look like for you and Patty to vote in every election? Why is that important?
I think it's important because, first of all, God's given us that sovereignty. And when we don't exercise the sovereignty he gives us, it makes me think of First Chronicles chapter 20, where it said that in the spring when kings go out to war, David chose to stay behind in his house, which led to his sin with Bathsheba. So we're like a king that refuses the responsibility to go out to war when we don't exercise our sovereignty. Another way to think about it is in terms of the talents in Matthew 25. If we
Yes.
don't vote, we're taking a talent, a gift God has given us, and we're basically burying it in the ground. And it doesn't go well for that servant that buries his talent in the ground. So I don't think it's something that's optional. I think that failure to exercise our sovereign responsibility is a sin issue.
Well, we just had I just had Gabriella Gerhardt on last week talking about growing up under communism in Czechoslovakia and the difference between coming to America, realizing our freedoms and liberties, and here we are in a very unique place where we've been given that right. I mean, a lot of countries don't have the right. Remember, when the Iraqis got their freedom, and remember they had their purple fingers, right? So happy about voting, right? We have a responsibility in this nation to take the gift that we've been given by the founders and use that. But let's dig into that idea of sovereignty a little more, Scott. So I hear this all the time. Well, God's sovereign, and he's going to, people are going to be in leadership regardless of what we do. How do you answer that?
Bunny, I guess I look at it from the standpoint of we live in a fallen world, but God doesn't expect us to be passive in a foreign world. And one of the scriptures I go to on this is Proverbs 21:31. The horse is prepared for the day of battle, but victory belongs to the Lord. It is our responsibility to prepare that horse for battle. And in this case, we need to go out and select the best leaders we can to govern our nation. Yes, victory ultimately rests on God. He may bring it about or he may not.
Right.
But it's our responsibility to do what we can to prepare our horse for the day of battle.
Well, and John Quincy Adams, I love the quote where he says, "Duty is ours, the results are God's," right?
Absolutely. That's his way of restating that proverb.
Yeah. So we have a responsibility, and it's almost like prayer. We have to ask to receive that our joy would be full, right?
Yes.
Prayer is not a passive thing. It's not like, oh, I just think about prayer and that works. No, you have to actually ask God, and then you receive that your joy may be full. The same thing with voting. We quote that scripture out of Proverbs a lot. When the righteous rule, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan. There is a direct reaction to those who are in authority over us, that affects our lives.
That's right. And the importance of selecting leaders, able, discerning leaders who fear God. Another proverb I like is righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people.
Yes. And we're not saying that every human, that puts on their pants one leg at a time is completely righteous, but those that have been covered in the blood of Jesus, that acknowledge Jesus, that acknowledge their Christian worldview, is one step ahead, definitely, of having the moral compass and the wisdom and the discernment to be able to rule
Yes.
with integrity versus those that are not. Okay, so let's talk about primaries because I know every state's going to have a primary this year. You're choosing between people of the same party. First of all, you have to choose what party you're going to vote for. And we really encourage people at Christians Engage, read the platforms of the parties. If you're in the state of Texas, read the Democratic platform, read the Republican platform. If you're in, other states, everybody should read their state platforms and their national platforms. They are different. They are different. They have a lot of the same thoughts, but they are changed because of the people that are involved in those parties actually change the platforms. And that's why Christians should be involved in political parties. Let's just say it that way. But you're voting based on values of those platforms, and you're voting for candidates that support those values or say they support those values. That's a whole nother story about whether they do, right? We can get into that or not. But when people go to Washington, D.C., or they go to Austin, at the end of the day, they're following leadership that are governing based on a political party. So how do people pick even there, Scott, as Christians? I mean, we are very independent. We're not going to be a part of one specific political party as believers. We are supposed to be in the world, but not of the world, kingdom-minded, focused people. So we have to make those choices. How do you make that
Right.
choice?
Well, the first thing, as you said, is to look at the party platform and look at the issues and see which one conforms to the Word of God, which one conforms most closely to the Word of God. And that's probably the party that you want to vote in, because you're more likely to have more candidates that are aligned with a biblical worldview than you would in a party that rejects God's Word, that rejects the wisdom that God gives us. Then as you get into your candidates, apply the same thing. Are they wise? Are they discerning? Are they experienced? Are they men who hate dishonest gain? Are they people who fear God? Look at these characteristics and try to sort out which ones fall in those categories and which ones don't. So sometimes you'll find that people are fairly closely aligned. Well, then it gets down to maybe a judgment call. Maybe at that point, you even consider electability.
Mm-hmm.
Electability is the last thing I would consider, particularly in a primary where you have a wide choice. I would really focus on the leadership characteristics of each candidate.
Well, I like to say vote your conscience in the
Yes.
primary, and then in the general election, you've got to vote on your party platforms, because if you don't, people can say that they're one way, but at the end of the day, again, they're going to vote with their leadership.
Buddy, there's a lot of talk about term limits. And if you send somebody up there and they aren't legislating or executing in accordance with the party platform, or in accordance with biblical principles, what they said they espouse, you know what? In 2 years or 4 years, you got a chance to limit their terms and put somebody up there who will. And in that regard, I don't believe in defaulting to voting for the incumbent. A lot of people do. And a lot of people think, well, I'm going to vote for the incumbent because he's electable. And I just don't think that's a good choice, particularly in a primary.
No, and primaries is where we make our choices. We all kind of know, and there's been a lot of news coverage on this, especially with redistricting, that most congressional districts are gerrymandered
Yes.
for one party or the other. It's just the truth, guys. So primaries are really where the election is. Many of y'all know that I ran in a Republican primary. And, the primary we had $1 million spent on each side of a primary, right? Because that was really where the choice was made. And for the most part, that member of Congress would serve really as long as they wanted, as long as they were not defeated in a primary, again, because it was very much a gerrymandered district. But you need to look at the candidates' bios, their personal stories.
Yes.
You need to look at their issues page. If they're not and I say this all the time, Scott, if people aren't telling you what they believe, guys, on their website, do not vote for them if they're not going to be forthcoming.
I I have a couple other comments too.
Yes.
One of the things that we've come to is we try to go to meetings where we can actually meet the candidates. And our
Yes.
first question is, "Tell me about your faith."
Yeah.
And am I getting a canned response, or is this person passionate, and do they have a detailed story of how they came to Christ? That's one of the things that we look for right up front is what does their walk with God look like?
Right. And it might not that they might not go to the same church or denomination as you do, but if you can get that answer with sincerity of heart, um,
Well, those qualifications in the Old Testament don't say anything about their position on the return of Jesus or
right.
premillennial rapture, things like that. It focuses on some basic human characteristics, and I think that makes it a little bit easier to check those off, particularly if you've got a track record to go from. I want to say one other thing, too, and that's about negative ads. I'm really not a fan of negative ads. Look at that as gossip. Right there,
Mm.
I think that's like a negative point for any candidate gets up there and all they can talk about is what's wrong with their opponent. Don't tell me what's wrong with the opponent. You tell me what you're going to do, what you stand for,
What's
what
your
your
plan?
record is.
Yeah, that's good, Scott, because if they're not telling you about themselves, what are they trying to hide? And so if kind of what I like to tell people to do is print off your ballot, go to your elections department website, right? And you can look at this at christiansengage.org. We're going to have a guide for your primaries. Print off your ballot from your elections department, look at every name, and spend 5 minutes looking at each race. I mean, that could be literally like, okay, I'm going to look up the land commissioner race now. Well, I'm going to look up these names. I'm going to look at their websites. I'm going to see if they tell me what they believe. What are they putting out on their Facebook pages? Look at key organizations around your state, whether that's the right to life issue, fiscal responsibility issues, whatever it is that you're looking for, you really care about. Look to see what those organizations say. Do they endorse? Who are they endorsing? Who are they pushing? Why are they pushing those people? But if you do like basic, little bit of research, it doesn't take a whole long time, but you can literally research your whole ballot in 30 minutes.
That's really true. It was very hard back, when I first started voting in the 70s.
Before the internet.
Before the internet, it was hard to find out people's positions. But with the internet, you can go to their websites and you can find out a lot of information. And I think that's always a good start. By the way, a comment on candidates that don't have a website. That one of the first qualifications is able. I kind of feel like if they don't have a website, that sort of puts them in a negative category on ability right there.
Yeah.
To me, that's almost a disqualifier.
Well, and that is another point that I like to bring up in our on-ramp to civic engagement seminars, which, by the way, if you haven't taken that, you need to take it online or come to one of our live events.
Indeed.
But, pick leaders. They don't have to have ever been elected before, but they need to have showed some sort of executive leadership experience because, we were talking to one of our county commissioners the other day. They've got to run staff. They've got to run millions of dollars in budgets, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've never run a small business or you've never run, at least 10 staff members or run a project or something, how are you going to have the ability to make that shift? And then, this should not have to be said, but don't hire and don't vote for criminals and people with felonies on their record. It happens, guys. You can't just vote for somebody's name because they have a famous name, right? Scott, we've had some situations here in Texas recently over the last couple of years. One of them was one of our railroad commissioners was defeated in a primary because a guy that was running against him, had a name of the former Speaker of the House, Texas House. And I don't know if people thought that guy had just come back or what, but I mean, defeated a guy that had millions of dollars, to like $5,000 just because of his famous name. And then we had a guy, and actually Scott Walker's a good man on our Court of Appeals here in Texas, but, don't tell me that his name, Scott Walker, being the former governor of Wisconsin's name, didn't have an impact on his election, right? So just because they have a famous name, guys, does not mean that they're the right person to vote
No kidding.
for.
No kidding. That's the truth. If interesting enough on this issue of like integrity and things like that, it just recently around here, there's a candidate for a family court that was arrested for domestic violence. It's like, all right, check that one off the list.
Check that one off the list, guys. I mean, you have to do some research. Now, another thing I like to tell people do is Google their names. See what comes up. Shocking what you might find just in a simple Google search. So,
But I would say to that, consider the source. Where did that information
yes.
come from? Particularly if you're using like Google. I prefer a little less biased search engines like DuckDuckGo.
There you go.
Because Google will point you to biased sources. So always look at what the source is.
Yes.
You'll get one slant from the Dallas Morning News and a different one from the Epoch Times. So
Right.
be sure to look at multiple sources from different perspectives.
That's good, Scott. And make sure if you see a report, if it's some random person's blog, that there are some credible sources backing that up.
Yeah.
Too, because anybody can put out a story and it can look official, but make sure that you see that is that story being repeated 3 or 4 times somewhere
Right.
out there that kind of gives it more credibility.
Right.
So building this habitual habit of voting, Scott, we know that most people that vote in every election, including their school board, city council, primaries, all this stuff, are 70 years or older.
Oh my gosh.
Really?
I'm in that demographic.
Oh my goodness. So what do you tell young people to start, doing that? Why should they start building habits of voting in every election?
Well,
As you're sharing with them about the next generation. You're leaving something to them.
Well, of course, I developed my habits. It was modeled by my parents. My parents were voters. They were engaged in parties and different organizations like that, and so it kind of comes naturally. But I would say to young people today that every vote you cast is a vote for your future, the future of your children, and the future of your grandchildren. Heck, at my age, I could almost check out now and go to the lake and probably be pretty much okay to the end of my life. But I am concerned about the kind of world I am leaving to my children and to my grandchildren and to my grandchildren's children.
Yes.
And I want to leave them that republic that Dr. Franklin gave us.
Yes. Now, there's a lot of Christians listening to us and that are connecting with Christians Engaged that are very concerned about other Christians, doing exactly what we're talking about, praying, voting, engaging. How do you use, I know you're very involved with your church at City Bridge and former Watermark, Plano, but how do you use the pledge and how do you register voters and how do you help your leadership? What can people do around the state or around the nation to help engage their church to get more Christians doing these things?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to engage leadership. You have to build relationships with key senior staff and with your elders, depending on how your church is governed,
Yep.
and let them get to know you, know what kind of a person you are, that you're a person of ability and integrity, and
Yes.
need to encourage them to find that sweet spot. Many churches are so worried about not being angry that they move to apathy about politics. Where we
Right.
need to land is somewhere in the middle. We need to be non-apathetic. We need to be passionate about our nation. On the other hand, not everything is a cause for raging anger. And so they have to know that you're a sober-minded person that's well qualified. So the first thing is to build relationships. Now, what we did, we have a number of things going on at City Bridge. We've partnered with Christians Engage. Yesterday, we held a combined voter registration and pledge drive for Christians Engaged. So we set up 2 tables side by side. My friend John Goodale, who's a voter registrar in Collin County, he was registering voters on one side, and Patty and I were on the other side and getting people to take the pledge. We had several resources out there, including a paper I wrote for City Bridge on primary elections. They printed up a bunch of copies and put it on our table.
Great.
But we pointed people to the pledge first. Said, look, what we're asking people to do, pray for the nation
Right.
5 minutes a week,
Right.
vote in every election, and get engaged in some way.
Yep.
And we had quite a few people that that came up to us is not so much the numbers, but the quality. They were passionate about doing this, and they would take it up. They were scanning the QR code on their phone. Some of them took the card and went on. Particularly, they had to like pick up the kid in childcare and didn't have much time. But we had a lot of interest. But it starts with kind of circling back. It starts with getting to know your senior staff, your elders, your church leadership, so they know that you're a sober and responsible person. And then, you can call in. I know you've met with Kyle Kegler, our senior pastor. We can bring in people from Christians Engaged to show them what kind of organization we are.
Yep.
Because I think they want to know that we're not just a partisan organization.
Right.
Our nonpartisan approach and the fact that we are biblically based.
Exactly.
The Bible is our standard.
Yes.
Not a party platform at the end of the day, not
Right.
anything else. The Bible is the standard.
Right.
And they need to know that, because I think that gives them some confidence that we aren't going to take a ride on the crazy train with them.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, pastors are looking for ways to communicate. How do we operate as being Christians in this country, in America, in this generation? And we're trying to fill the gap there. But you make a great point, Scott. Anybody can do this, But you also, what Scott and Patty have done, let me just sing your praises for a second, is you are those people. You're not mouthing off on social media, being weird or cutting down people or being that angry political person that's not a Christ follower first. And so your church leadership sees that and they're like, oh, wow, I love Scott and Patty's approach to this. Yes, let's figure out how to use them as people of influence and subject matter experts in connecting people to civic government, and that works. You can be that person in your local church. I don't know so many churches we've been in, Scott, around Texas have been because of the person that's at that church. We just did a seminar in Rowlett this last month, and that started because of one member of a church was at one of our other seminars in Melissa, Texas, and she's texting her pastor saying, you need to meet Bunni. And that connection then produced a Sunday morning service and a seminar, like out of nowhere, right? So you can have a lot of influence in your local church and connecting people. And the way you do that is register voters. Get in with your local elections department. Become a deputy voter registrar.
Yes.
Where you can register voters. Explain that to people, Scott. What's the difference between just handing them a card and being a deputy voter registrar?
Okay. Yes, we like to have deputy voter registrars when we do voter registration, and the reason for that is if they fill out the voter registration right there on the spot, the registrar gives them a receipt, and if for some reason they don't get their voting certificate in the mail, that receipt is as good as the voting certificate. That receipt guarantees that they can vote in that election.
Right.
And so we really promote the deputy voter registrar as the means to register voters.
And they drop those off to the elections department, and the person doesn't have to worry about it, and they don't have to take the card and leave it on their kitchen table and never fill it out,
Right. I mean, it's one and done. You're done, and you walk away with a receipt that's as good as your voter registration
So
card.
that's step one. Every time we go to a church, we're registering voters, but that in and of itself is not going to remind you that there's elections happening. So that's why we created the Pledge to Pray, Vote, Engage, and this tool where Christians around a state, we're in Texas and Pennsylvania right now, will get the exact dates of when to vote and when to get to the polls and when we just a few days ago had the last day to register people to vote. So those kind of things that we need to know and be able to share with our friends. And you can actually become an influencer by sharing that with people. You can go to our website at christiansengage.org/pledge, and you can actually copy that link and text it around to all your friends and family and just say, you need to start voting in every election like me. Don't forget the primary. Take Christians Engage Pledge. And that will help them by getting those text messages and those emails and educating them on biblical values as well. What was another part of your favorite part of writing this book? You wrote on judges. Tell us
I
a little
did.
bit. A lot.
That one.
School boards.
Yeah,
gave
the
Scott
one on judges. I like that one because I used a quote that my father always used to quote my grandfather. My grandfather was a judge in El Dorado, Arkansas, back in the day, and for a long time, many decades. And he liked to say, "You are only free so long as you can go into a court and get equity."
Oh, wow.
Now when I
Yes.
say equity, I want to real quick mention, I don't mean what the diversity, equity, and inclusive people mean. They have changed that word, but equity
Right.
means you can go into a court and get a fair judgment based on the facts.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that was one of his quotes. So I think that was one of my points. It's important. Again, really the same criteria apply to judges. We want men of ability. In this case, you're looking for people that are schooled in the law, that have shown a track record of court practice. I mean, if they're running for a criminal court, they should have been a prosecutor or a defense attorney. They should know one side at least, and preferably both. Some people do both sides, so they
Right.
should have ability. And then we're looking for people that are honest, that fear God, and are wise and discerning. Certainly, wisdom and discernment are important in your judges.
Yes.
And again, it's I think it's good to go to town halls, to political club meetings, to party meetings when you can, because usually these candidates will be there, and you can talk to them face to face. What's your what's your faith, and
Yeah.
then what's your judicial philosophy,
So good.
and that sort of thing.
They're a lot more accessible than people think. I mean, you can get to know your
Yes.
candidates and elected officials if you just put yourself out there a little bit. We had one area leader with Christians Engaged, Scott, that actually went around and interviewed, like had coffee with all of her people in the last primary, and I thought that was brave, but she did it as a test study to show people that these people are very accessible if you reach out.
They are, and I agree with that. I also want to comment on the judges. I remember one time I was at a meeting talking to a candidate for a family court, which that's down near the bottom of the ballot. People consider that as being unimportant. And she said to me, the family court judge has the most power of anybody in the judicial system. It is the only judge that can take your property, break up your family, and put you in jail.
Yes. Yes.
No other court can do all three. And yet those are the positions down at the bottom of the ballot that we lightly esteem all too often.
So good. So people can really make a difference. You can get pledge cards from us if you want to take these to your local churches. Just reach out to Shelly. Reach out to us on our website, and we'll send you a whole package if you want. Register people. You can grab these books, the vote books, Your Biblical Guide to the Sacred Responsibility by Scott and I, and we can get this to you in bundles as well. So grab those. Spend some time this month encouraging, educating people in your local churches, in your home group, in your Sunday school to vote in every election. And those of you around the country, we're coming for you. Your primaries are coming. You better, this is just your, just deal with us, Texas people, and just be prepared that your date is coming. And hopefully this is a resource to help you do that. Now, in February, Scott, we've got some other cool things happening.
Yes, we do.
We're launching some new classes.
We are launching a new class. We're going to offer an online class called Biblical Citizenship that we're offering in partnership with Patriot Academy. It's really their product.
Yes.
It's going to be in 8 weeks. It's going to be 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. on Thursday nights, starting on February 22nd, and free of cost. Am I right?
Is it
Yes,
Tuesday nights? Or
I'm sorry. I'm
Tuesday
sorry.
nights.
You're correct. It's Tuesday nights.
Yes.
I'm thinking of a different. Sorry, I got my products mixed up
Starting
there.
February 22nd. Yes.
February 22nd. It's going to be on Tuesday nights.
Yes.
And Patty and I will host that, and then we'll play the videos. And this is excellent. We went through the series last fall, and just really impressive. They go deeply into the backgrounds of the founders, showing their religious views, how many of them were pastors. And what I like about David Barton and Rick Green is they don't just tell you about it.
Right.
Like your school teacher say, well, they were all deists. No, they will go and quote from their letters, their
Yes.
other writings. They will quote about the Constitution from Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention, and they will show you the evidence for every assertion they make. So they do a deep dive into the founding, then they do a deep dive into how the Constitution is really constructed using biblical principles, and then how those things apply to issues today. And it's very, very good. The speakers are excellent.
And they have Kirk Cameron and
Oh
Michelle
yeah.
Bachman and Rob McCoy and all these great people on this curriculum. It's intense.
Oh yes, it's really good. If you've never seen Kirk Cameron talk about the Founders Monument in Massachusetts, that is really something to see. The symbolism in that shows us how our republic was constructed, and it starts with the hand of liberty pointing to God.
Well, we're super excited about this partnership because we can never teach the Constitution like Rick Green and
Right.
David Barton. Not going to try. So I love this because you can come on, and Scott and Patty will be on there, and a couple of our other leaders, having a discussion before each video, and then having a little discussion at the end. So you feel like you're not just watching this by yourself; you're watching it with a team. It's 2 hours of commitment, each week, but you're going to learn so much and be able to teach so many people.
As long as Patty and I have been at this, and as deeply involved we have been in studying the history and the law and things like that, we still learned a lot.
Oh yeah,
from that program. It was not there was a lot of new material and just depth of detail that we hadn't seen before.
It's good.
It was great.
So you can come on, learn it, and then figure out how you can teach it as well. And then also we're starting something I've been looking for a long time, Scott, as you know, is how did we teach basic foundations of the Bible on hot cultural topics? One of the cultural topics, if you're watching us on video, is racism, right? Well, I had this divine appointment. BB on our board hooked me up with this guy, Ben Quine. His father and mother, David and Shirley Quine, have had a cornerstone curriculum, homeschooling curriculum for years, have a whole production company. And Ben was so burdened because he was hanging out with some friends at church, and they were like, well, God doesn't talk about economics. The Bible doesn't talk about racism. Well, he's like, what? And so if you haven't listened to my interview with Ben, you need to go back and listen to that. But we are going to launch classes. Ben and I are going to teach these together. These books that he has are just so great. Fill in the blank. Let's study what the Bible has to say about racism. Let's look at our history in America. Let's look about what God has to say about reconciliation, restitution, healing. Josh McDowell has endorsed all of his books, and I'm really excited about this. There is a little bit of cost to these classes. They're $60. It'll be 7 weeks, every Monday night with Ben, and then we'll go on to the next one a few weeks later. But we'll send you the book, and you can get going on that. But sign up for those and become those subject leader experts that people in your church can run to and get answers, right?
Right. Hey, since you're talking about worldview, I want to throw in something. Just another plug for City Bridge. They're doing a worldview series right now, and they're framing it around 3 basic questions. And take any issue and say, what does the Bible say about that? How do I respond to that issue? And then how do I love people as an ambassador of Christ?
It's good.
And those are the 3 things we should look at, no matter what their issue is. Taxes, economics, racism. That's really the filter that we should be putting it through.
That's a great filter. So check out all of that at christiansengage.org/classes and sign up and make sure that Scott and Patty have lots of people on that Zoom call. And they're expecting you to not just be on the first 2. You got to be on number 7 and 8 too, right? But again, part of this, guys, is I really felt like at the beginning of the year, we need to dive deep in our souls and be prepared for what's ahead. I don't know about you, Scott. Were you prepared for 2020?
No, I can't say that I was.
I was, as what, quote unquote, spiritually mature as we are, I think all of us have come to the place where we're like, wow, okay, there's some growth there's some growth in my life. There's some maturity that needs to happen. And there's definitely more of the Word of God that I need to strengthen myself for whatever is coming ahead. We have no idea what's coming ahead. So we need to dive deeper.
I think the last 3 years have really showed us the reality of spiritual warfare. I think the enemy's been at work behind the scenes, but now he's out there in our face. And it's going to
Yep.
take courage and faith to stand firmly now and in the future.
Yes. So, yeah, let's learn to not just depend on, like I talked about with Ben, these 20 minutes on a Sunday morning. You know,
No,
if we try to live on 20 minutes on a Sunday morning and that become our food for the week. I mean, have you ever lived on one meal a week, Scott?
no, I haven't. I
No.
can't recall ever trying that.
So, why do we do this as Christians, try to live on one meal a week? I do not know. But anyway, we're trying to provide some resources for you. If you're not getting discipled in these areas in your local church, we want to be that parachurch ministry that helps you to learn about these incredible issues. But to be able to cut through all the commentary out there, whether it's the left or the right, based on having a foundation in the Word of God that can center you and ground you, right?
Absolutely. And to reinforce what you said, one of the principles at City Bridge that we live by is devote daily. We need to be in the Word. We need to be on our knees in prayer. It can look different from day to day, but we should be devoting time to God daily.
So good. So good, Scott. Well, let's get out there and vote, guys. Everybody in Texas in the primaries, it's February 14 through 25 is early voting. Election day is March 1st. So get all your family and friends to take our pledge and they will not forget the primary. Now, whether they vote or not is another story. You'll have to hold them accountable to that, but we will at least remind them multiple times and give them the resources and the guide to help them vote in the primary. And all you other folks around the country, get ready for your primary. Go ahead and look it up on your Secretary of State's website. Put those in your phone, in your calendar. I know I'm a weird person that actually puts election days in my calendar, but that's the kind of person that you need to be. And that's the kind of leader and influencer that you can be to remind people that these dates are important for your city, your state, and your nation. Well, thanks for joining me, Scott, today.
Thanks for having me,
Thanks
Bunny.
for
It was
serving.
a pleasure.
Woohoo!
It's a blessing. It's a blessing to serve.
Well, we appreciate you so much. Okay, we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much.